Welcome back. We're here with Ingrid Centurion, founder and president of Generations for America, and she's also a retired colonel. You have a lot of flight experience. You teach pilots how to fly, and we've been talking about the tragedy over the Potomac and how it could have been possibly equipment error that caused this accident. We were also talking about situational awareness. Want to get into some of the other components, because it's not just one radar altimeter, it's not just one thing or the other. There's so many components to help fly an aircraft. So maybe you can talk a little bit more about the other instruments that pilots heavily rely on.
Well, on this flight, the pilots were heavily relying on their altimeter and visual reference points on the ground. They were flying this route that they should have memorized, and it was a check ride. So the co-pilot needs to fly everything right on, but at the same time, the instructor pilot always is in control, and if anything is off, he should take corrective action immediately in such a congested airspace. And we talk about the altitude and being right on the altitude.
And when you have the military aircraft and the commercial airliners that are all kind of converging within the same airspace, and we talked about this the last time, and there is no issue. It happens everywhere across the country, across the world, where you have the combination of the two types of aircraft in the same airspace. So that's not going to change. But what about just the antiquated equipment that we have that the FAA is operating with? The Trump administration is certainly upset about it. In fact, the FAA just fired upwards of 400 people. They were in probationary, and no air traffic controllers. That's one thing. No air traffic controllers were fired. But where is this money going that we're not upgrading our equipment to make sure that it actually works the way it should?
Well, aviation is very expensive.
Sure.
Operating an aircraft is very expensive. So as we put equipment on our aircraft, it costs a lot of money to build this aircraft, to test them, to design them. And equipment is made with certain tolerance, plus or minus 100 feet, plus or minus 50 feet. We have to understand that aviation is expensive. So the manufacturer builds a piece of equipment, and they do testing, and and then the FAA has standards for us. And so the FAA set standard. Going back to the radar altimeter, in the maintenance manual with the FAA, it's plus or 75 feet. So if you were to do your ground check and the radar altimeter is 75 feet off, then that instrument has to go into maintenance. Okay.
And that gets reported.
Yeah,
right?
that gets reported. And so we have standards that are set by the FAA. And I guess that's what the standards are. We have to increase our standards and make them tighter, I guess, if you want that.
And how antiquated are we talking? When we say antiquated, are we talking 5 years old, 10 years old, 30 years old? Typically, what would you say?
On that specific radar
just across
altimeter,
the board. Just across the board. What kind of equipment are we working with?
We're working with equipment that's 10 years old.
At least?
At least.
Yeah. And it's used every single day. And we don't see these accidents happening every single day. In fact, it's very rare that we do. Also, we wanted to talk a little bit about tower frequency issues. Of course, the tower has to have good communication with everybody who's in the air. And UHF versus VHF, can you touch on that a little bit?
So we have different, I talked about this, we had 5 radios that were listened to. We have multiple different frequencies. So some aircraft are on a UHF frequency and a VHF frequency. And there could have been some miscommunication on what frequency they were on communicating with the tower.
I see.
And that's, it's cockpit management and managing your flight. There's a lot of stuff going on, like I said last time, and it's communication error. Identifying the aircraft where it was. Also, the other thing I wanted to talk about is in the Black Hawk, there are some blind spots, and that could have also been a contributing factor to this. As with night vision goggles on, you have the Black Hawk door, you have a piece that runs right down the middle. This happened so fast and at high air speeds These are all contributing factors.
How fast do you think that they were traveling?
I think they said they were traveling at 100 and, well, the one aircraft was coming down, the fixed wing aircraft was coming down, descending at like 400 feet a minute.
Yeah.
And it was at around 143 knots.
Oh gosh.
And then the Black Hawk was coming at around 120 knots.
Wow. So really split-second decisions. And from what I understand is the commercial jetliner, they did try to quickly go back up again, but it was just too late at that point.
And that's the piece of equipment that we talk about, traffic collision avoidance system,
Right.
TCAS.
TCAS.
Well, below 1,000 feet, TCAS doesn't give you a audio alert
Okay.
because of the ground clutter with so many other things.
Right, otherwise it'd be going
But
off
they did,
constantly.
they were given a signal, and that's why we find out that the aircraft was pitched up.
Yes.
And it told them that there was traffic coming their way, but it was just too late. You have this aircraft coming down
Everything's so fast.
400 feet
Yeah.
a minute, and turning left, it wasn't enough time.
Ingrid, thank you so much for coming back and further clarifying, and we're going to still learn more about this accident, and we always love to talk to you and hear your expertise. So thank you so much for coming on. We'll be back after this.